Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to 321 Gang's webinar, What's New in IBM Common Licensing, or ICL, version 9.x. My name is Kara Rawlings. I'd like to tell you a little bit about 321 Gang before we get started. 321 Gang are a Platinum IBM business partner, a Scaled Agile Gold training partner, and Atlassian and GitLab partners as well. The Gang are the continuous engineering experts, and we are industry leaders in scaling lean and agile practices. We offer our clients a powerful combination of expert consulting services, training, and software tooling solutions to accelerate and drive results in the most complex, highly regulated systems and software engineering environments. So whether you're facing regulatory, economic, or technological challenges, 321 Gang offers industry-focused training, consulting, and tools, and we can help. Talk to us today and learn how we can help you deliver the solutions your team needs. So please take note of the question box that's in your control panel, and we'll be accepting questions throughout the presentation. We'll address them at the end. So today we are pleased to have our very own Lou Cody as a presenter. Lou is a senior solutions consultant for 321 Gang and has over 20 years of customer-facing experience with the Rational and IBM testing solution. He started off at SQA as a support engineer, then moved on to Rational as a support team leader, supporting the ASQ testing tools. After working as a manager of performance testing tools, Lou decided to then become a sales engineer focused on the testing tools and left Rational to work for a customer as a senior QA analyst. Soon, Lou came back to the Rational and joined the services team. Then Rational was acquired by IBM as he became a systems engineer, then a community of practice lead for quality management. As a level 3 engineer, Lou spent the next few years managing ELM, eventually managing the level 3 worldwide team. And now Lou has circled back to his roots as an ELM consultant with 321 Gang, the continuous engineering experts. So that concludes the intro here, and Lou, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So let's get going, folks. I'm just going to pop over here to our agenda. So what we're going to talk about today is, we're going to have an overview of the IBM Common Licensing. We're going to talk about the system requirements. We're going to talk about the interfaces of the new IBM License Key Server v9. We're going to talk about the differences and similarities between RLKS 8.1 and ICL 9.x, and this is something that sticks right out when I look at it. Is this is basically the branding of Rational, as now it's known as the IBM Common Licensing Tool. And then we're going to talk about administrator tips using v9. So let's get going. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page, we're going to have an overview here. And so the IBM Common Licensing offers license management for the IBM solution, both ELM and Rational products. Products meaning Rapid Pub, Doors Classic. So with this new IBM Common Licensing, your organization can track, monitor licenses, and evaluate licenses of various products and help understand, what their usage is. The license management tool consists of a series what comes with 2 web applications. They help administer the license server and prepare reports. These reports, kind of what they do is present a view of the licenses by product. They help you understand the usage in an organization. With these types of reports, you can prepare detailed metrics, understanding the total number of licenses being used by products or by users. Now, as IBM has it, this is a very long name. There's 2 web-based tools that are part of the IBM Common Licensing. The first is the IBM License Key Server Administration Agent. From here forward, we're going to call this the IBM LKS agent. And then there's the IBM License Key Server Administration and Reporting Tool. So moving forward, we will call this the IBM LKS ART. And you'll notice that in some of the documentation that IBM provides, they refer this to as the ART. It's a lot easier to say. So continuing with our overview, first of all, what you have is your license server. And it does, in this case is IBM _LKS. That's how we're going to refer to it moving forward, just like the agent and the ART. A license server that hosts the license files, pretty straightforward. The agent Now, here's something new: is the agent is installed on a WebSphere applications server Liberty profile container. So that's something different than the former license key server. Now, the IBM LKS ART requires the agent to be installed on the server with either the LKS or the ELM-JTS. Now, as you can see here, the IBM agent performs two key functions. These two key functions are, one of them is the agent obtains a server status by using the LM-util command. And you can see here in the little diagram that you have your license key servers, you have your LKS, you have your Jazz Team server, you have your agent. These two guys work in concert with each other. Then the second purpose of this agent is that the agent uses the IBM LKS, the server log, to convert log data into SQL records. And these SQL records are basically the understanding of the license uses, and it stores it into a database. In this case, an IBM2 database. And we call this database the ART data. So this is where we have a collection of all our data so that customers can either run queries to help understand the reports that they're looking for, to help them understand the usage and who's using it and the actual peak time. So here's a bigger picture of how it looks. So this is just a sample IBM license server topology. So on the left-hand side, we have our minimal, because you notice that you have your IBM LKS, your port 2700, and you have your agent, port 5043, and that's running in a Liberty profile. And what happens here is that if you wanted to, I do have one customer right now that is in the middle of implementing the reporting capability. You have another Liberty's profile set up for the ART, and that uses port 4743. Now what happens is that you need to have a DB2 server. No, won't support anything else but DB2, but that's all right, because you're entitled to having DB2. And there's a database called the ART data. Now this is where, like I mentioned, this is where all the log information is generated into SQL commands so that you can help understand and generate queries based on the report that you might be looking for. So continuing with our overview, we have additional elements of the IBM Common Licensing. First of all, you have the CLM, ELM, or rational product, as I mentioned, Rhapsody, Doors, RPE, whatever it might be. You have the IBM License Key Center Web Portal, that is another component of this, or element. And you have your license.dat and your Jazz token zip. Now, these are all parts of the whole common licensing umbrella. And what happens here is that the IBM LKS interacts with the client applications. So this is the first interface with the applications, is the LKS. The agent also has the capability of displaying how many licenses are checked out now. And at the bottom of this, I actually added the link, because this is your landing page. This is your starting page for getting to the actual Key Center web portal. Now, when you're playing with all these licenses, you got to figure out the host name, and there used to be this utility called get host info. And that's what it would tell you. You're either your disk serial number, it would tell you your Ethernet address, and then when you get that information, you go to the license key center and you create your license based off that data. I'm still trying to work and understand how this is found in the V9, because in the previous version, it came with an option in the tool where you could actually generate that information and understand this is the information that I need to actually create my licenses. So there's some things are easier in the previous version, but then there's some great things in the new version. But I'm still working on trying to find a way, and we're working with IBM Product Management to actually find how can you find this. Well, you go just go an IP config and get your Ethernet address that way, and that'll work. But maybe you don't want to use Ethernet address. So once you get your file that you're looking for, your license files, you got your license.dat file, and that's going to be used to import to the agent. and you got your Jazz token zip, all the jar files that you want to import to the JTS, or specific ones, because you don't want to load all of them because some cost more than others. So you want to actually be as efficient as possible when you're importing your jars to the JTS. Now, as you know, the license.dat file consists of the data, the licenses for the products the customer is entitled to, their expiration date of the licenses, and the host ID, the information where this is going to run on the IBM license key server. So, little tip here is that if your host ID changes based on the IBM LKS, like you're moving servers or whatever it might be, the first thing you need to do is the licenses must be returned to the IBM License Key Center web portal. Then you generate a new host ID. You get your new host ID, then you get new licenses. You request them, you get those to license.dat and your Jazz tokens.zip. Now, once you have these, you configure them, you go to the JTS, you load up the files, to the agent, and you're all set. So I just gone through this recently with the customer, and yeah, pretty seamless, works just great. Now, one thing when I was, getting ready to deploy this, we have, 4 or 5 customers I'm actually doing this with right now, is that I looked at the requirements, and I'm like, man, it says I need 100 gigabytes for my license server and my agent. I'm like, that's a lot of space. So after I installed it, I noticed it was, my license server took up hardly anything, and my art and agent only took up, less than a gig. And so we went to IBM development and product management and asked, and they said, oh, well, the specifications and the requirements, we say that because we expect it to grow. So we want to make sure you have enough space for your reports and other assets that are created along the ways. So when you see that like, wow, that's a lot of space. That's just assuming that you're going to grow when it comes to creating reports and other assets in this area. So it's a little shocking when you first see it, because that 100 gigs is a lot of space. So when it comes to your system requirements, your typical AIX 7.1, 7.2, your Linux, your Windows database is needed, the IBM database for DB2, if you want to use the ART data. If you don't want to use, if you don't want any reporting capability, you don't need a database. But what you will need for the ART and also for the agent is a browser. Now we have here, for the reporting tool, you could use Firefox. Internet works a little bit, Explorer. But I noticed that the IBM agent can use Edge, and when you look for system requirements for the licensing tools, it's hard to find a lot of information, because a lot of the information still points back to the previous version, the 8.16. And I'll tell a story later on about how these browsers interact in different environments. But right now for the agent, I was using Edge, and it worked great because that's all my customer had. And it worked. And it was actually supported. Oops. So let's talk about the interfaces of the new License Key Server version 9. First of all, the License Key Server agent, we're going to talk about that new interface. And then we're going to talk about the ART, that new interface. And these are completely new. They didn't have these in the previous version of the licensing tool. So something new. It was great. I actually liked it. So the whole purpose of the agent. Now, a lot of these functions were once part of the former license key administrator. Well, now these functions have been rolled into the new agent. Now, the IBM LKS agent can either start and stop the license key server. It can display the status of the license key server. And it can actually tell you if this license key server is part of a triad configuration. And we'll talk about that briefly as we move on. What that is, it's just setting up redundant servers for your licenses in a high availability environment where, one server goes down, another one picks up. You can perform license key management. You can configure your server options. to the interface. Now, once you get everything running, everything's installed, you go to this URL at the bottom. You put in, your server name, port number, the ICL agent, and main, and you'll be presented with a nice little web application. And this is a couple of the widgets up top that you'll get. Now, this is now where in this agent, you have the capability to stop the server, start the server, restart the server, whatever you need to do. Or you have a little box next to it that tells you if this server is part of a redundant triad server configuration. Now, what this is basically, as I mentioned, you have 3 servers, and they each have an LKS. They all have the license key server. The thing about this is that they have to be in the same local network, have the same OS, and the license files have to be on each one of them. So if one of these servers goes down, another one picks up. I'm actually talking to a customer now about establishing this in their environment. But this is something that all can be handled through configuring the agent. And in this slide, because in the notes, I actually include a URL that would tell you detailed by detailed steps on how to set up this triad. But this is more about what's new than it is for implementation. Here's some other widgets that the agent provides. It provides a token usage summary, so you can see, what's your current usage of the tokens, how many are in use, how many available, how many deployed. So it gives you a quick little breakdown. It tells you the server characteristics, your operating system, the time, the version of LKS. And one thing I noticed about LKS is that even though you might have some iFixes applied, it won't tell you the exact iFix number you have. There's a screen that tells you that there's an iFix, but it doesn't tell you what number, what level of iFix you're on. So that's one thing that stood out to me as I was going through this for some of my customers. But at least this is some of the agents, some of the widgets that you can use as part of the agent. Now, this is something where this interface where you have the capability of actually importing your licenses, adding additional licenses through the agent. So now, when you have a license.dat file, you now implement it through the agent. So these are the ways that you could actually import, overwrite, or add additional licenses. So this is some of the GUI that's presented on the agent itself. So we're going to move over to the administration and reporting tool, the ART, as people like to call it. And what this is an optional component of reporting, but if you really want to do some reports to understand your license usage and availability, you would need to deploy the ART. Now, the reporting tool still uses the under the covers, the FlexNet publisher with the ELM technologies to generate these reports. But some of the reports that you can actually produce based on your floating and token licenses, or your license per user, license availability, expiration, token usage, per user, chargeback. If you want to actually go and charge a department, if there's a certain dollar amount that you want to actually have based that you could charge your users on, you could get to that level and understand, how much money is this really costing you for this department, and also concurrent peak usage. Now, when you install the IBM LKS, when I was doing this for a customer, I found the IBM documentation. It was very detailed, and it was kind of complex. It was like a couple pages, and I was like, man, this is kind of hard. But the first thing you need to do is you need to install your IBM 2 database. And once you install your database, you got to create a database. And the IBM even provides you with a response file to help you. And I have a path here of where that response file is located. Now, after I've gone through the documentation and trying to figure this thing out and pulling out my hair, I was like, something? I'm gonna go to YouTube, because YouTube always has a lot of good information, from building a house to how to install a reporting tool. So I went to YouTube and I was like, oh my God, there's a video here on how to do it. And I went through it and there it was. I had it installed in no time. So one of the first things you do is once you get it installed, you get your database created. You go to this URL right here. The user ID and password are RCL admin. That's the default. And once you log in to this left-hand screen, you're presented with a right-hand screen immediately saying, hey, now that you logged in, we got to configure your database. And then at this point, through your DB2 install, you have this information written down already as your user ID and your port number, and then that will allow you to make the last connection to get this up and running. Now, to install and use the ART, you got to have the agent and the license server. You got to install those. That's like the trio you got to have. So the agent must be installed on all the license server machines that you want to start to enable for reporting. If you have more than one instance of an IBM license key server, the agent has to be on each one of those instances, so you could actually remotely administer and generate reports. So that's part of the ART. The ART also includes an administration interface for both Windows and Linux. It gives you the viewing and monitoring capabilities of all your licenses from both the LKS and the Jazz Team server. There's LDAP integration for user management. Now there is an iFix if you are going to use LDAP that is available. So if you're going to use LDAP, there is an iFix. Implement that. The tool is usually just basically used to generate reports to understand your usage. That's what it really comes right down to, a breakdown of the usage of all your tokens and licenses. So this is just a little quick glimpse of the GUI of the reporting tool. You have your servers, you have reports, user management, database management, settings, and this is just one screenshot where you could actually begin to enter the license key server. You put in the license key server. Is it going to be an LKS server, an ELM authorized? You give it your agent, your host, and you could have your multiple servers and manage them from here. Now, I won't go in deep into creating reports, but you can see here that you have the capability of creating a report definition, modifying a report definition, viewing your saved reports, or looking at live statistics right now that's happening on these license servers. So these are the reports that you have available to you and that you have the possibility of creating when using the ART. Now, people will often ask, so what are the differences between RLKS 81X and 9X? Well, the former RLKS was a much smaller footprint. Didn't need much memory, not much disk space. It worked, and people were happy with that. But what happens when you go to the ICL, the Common Licensing 9X, it requires a much more memory, a lot more disk space, and additional liberty profiles. Now, the rational license key server was subject to Log4j vulnerabilities. And the IBM Common Licensing 9X has fixes to take care of these Log4j vulnerabilities. And I'm working with the customer right now, and they said, we cannot use anything that's open to Log4j vulnerabilities. We have to go to ICL 9X. There's no way around it. We have to do it. It will never pass through the cyber team. So those are some of the big differences right there. And the RLKS had an antiquated interface. It's kind of old, kind of clunky, but it worked. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the new ICL 9X has a new web interface. So those are some of the differences. And then also from an architecture standpoint, our LKS was very simple, wasn't very complicated. Very easy to stand up. Well, now the new ICL 9X requires several liberty profiles that fully implemented. You now have an agent, you have an ART, you have a license key server. So there's a lot more moving parts. some of the similarities between the two versions. Well, they both use FlexEra under the covers. They still both use a license.dat. They both have reporting capabilities. They still rely on the JTS to consume the Jazz tokens.zip. You know, they still use a DB2 at IBM DB2 database for reporting. So those things are core still to both of the reporting solutions. Now, there's this tech note that's out by IBM, and what happened was created because there was a 321 gang deployment taking place somewhere, and what happened was that they installed V9 and they couldn't get publishing working. It wasn't pulling tokens. There was a problem with it. So, you know, it was like, oh man. So IBM whipped out this tech note and they published it. But, you know, recently I've been working with the customer, and they have 702 and Publisher and V9, and it works with no problems at all. So there must be something else going on, you know, with this, either a customer environment issue or something. But, you know, if we're never in doubt, you know, stand up another copy if you have any questions of the license key server in the staging environments, and give it a run. But in the bottom of this slide, I actually put a link to this tech note just for reference. So how do I migrate from RLKS 8.1.x to ICL 9.x? Well, there's really no migration path between the two. You know, the first thing you need to do is decide which components will be implemented. You know, which ones do I really need? This will help me determine if I need a new standalone VM server. Is this really needed? If I'm not going to run any kind of reports or anything like that, then I won't need an extra server. But you know, right now, if you're running ELM 702 ICL and ICL 9x on the same VM server as the license.dat, that license.dat file can be used and imported into the agent with no problems. But if you're running CLM6, you know, you have to go through the whole process of getting your V6 license keys returned to the license key center portal. Then from there, you need to generate some new keys, and then you need to apply the V7 licenses to the IBM LKS through the agent. So, like I mentioned, there is no migration path. You just stand this up, get your license.dat, and you'll be good to go. Now we get to our little tips here, our little tips from administrative tips, and you know, a common question: do I need to run the IBM LKS on a separate server? Well, if you're going to do constant reporting, it might not be a bad idea. You know, because you're going to have all three: the agent, the license key server, the reporting tool, everything running. Yeah, maybe you would need a new server. And I'm actually in the middle of doing this right now for another customer. But you know, if you already have an existing IBM license key server set up, take advantage of the VMs. Take advantage of it now. Why create another box? But one thing we did notice is that, you know, the JVM for the LKS agent is kind of high. There's a file called JVM options, and I give the path right here, but the current JVM options are 16 gig and a minimum of 4 gig, and that's a wicked lot of memory. That's why you can see, well, you probably need another server. But if that's an issue, and you know, this is for like if you're going to run everything under the sun, the agent, the license key server, the reporting tool, you know, yeah, maybe you need that much memory. But if memory's an issue, you know, you can always modify this JVM options file to a max of 4 gig and a minimum of 1 gig. So that's one thing that I noticed immediately, like, wow, that's eating up all my memory. So little tip there. Another tip: do we need to run all these all the time? The LKS, the agent, and the ART? If you're just concerned with the license key server and just hosting licenses, all you need is that LKS. If you want to do some type of, if you do have the agent and the art installed, and you do want to start capturing metrics, start them up, bring them up ahead of time, and then you can begin to capture some meaningful data, and you can create your reports. Maybe, like I said, if you just want the license key server capability, just run the server. There's no need. And the agent, you get the agent up to load your licenses, but once you're done loading your licenses, bring it back down. There's no need to keep it up. So, if I want a minimal install, where to get the bits? So the first thing you do is you go to IBM Fix Central. You go to Fix Central and you choose your IBM Common Licensing. You notice it's no longer rational licensing or whatever there. This is the beginning of the debranding. And you choose IBM Common Licensing from the product selector. You choose your installed version. You choose your platform. And I'm even pretty sure that if in that installed version, if you hit the drop down and choose 815 or 816, it pops you right back to version 9. So that's a little thing I came across. So then you hit continue. Once you hit continue, you're presented with another screen, and it says, hey, you select additional query options, and you want to choose show fixes that apply to this version of 9.0. You click continue. Next thing you know, you're presented with a bunch of files to download. So the first thing you want to do is you want to download the license key server 9.0, the agent 9.0. Then there's some key iFixes that you do need. You need the GRE, the WebSphere Liberty profile, and the agent 9.0, the agent of iFix 6. Now, there's a bunch of other iFixes out there, but iFix 6 seems to be cumulative. Now, one thing about this is that if I don't have the art installed and only the agent, each one of these iFixes has the fixes for both the agent and the art. So when you do install these iFixes, if you only have the agent, only apply the agent part, do not follow the directions for the art. One thing I found also was that read the install directions that are included in the zip. Those are the most up-to-date recent directions. There are some other links out there that have you install these iFixes, but it's not really correct. It has you drop in your art database. It's very complicated, but if you just follow the release notes from the install for each one of these iFixes and only apply them to the agent, you'll be all set. Now, speaking of iFixes, the iFixes are primarily for the agent and the art. They're on Fix Central. They're manual install directions. So there's no GUI. It's just you renaming files, deleting folders, extracting contents, moving new WAR files in, and there's a couple of moving pieces here. So as always, you want to make a backup of the previous files. You want to do a dry run. You want to make sure that you have all these in place as a fallback when you do your backups of your previous files. But it's important to keep up on your iFixes, as you know. So just like for the applications, you got to make sure that your agents and your arts and your license key server are also up to date with iFixes. We were talking now about browsers a little while ago, and I have a little story here. So by default, when you log into the to the LKS agent, the interface, and there's the URL again, the username and password are the same: LKS admin, LKS admin. So we were there. We were in an environment, and they're like, how do you change this password? So we were on a Linux box using I think it was Linux, and then we were using Safari, but that is none of the browsers that are even supported. And I was like, let's change the password. So we went to that little profile icon and we try to click on it, and it's like, hey, there's no change password. So I'm like, well, let me look at my Windows box. And I did the same exact steps, went to my agent, went to my profile icon, I clicked on it, and like, I have changed password. So that's why it's kind of important to make sure that you're working with a supported browser, because some options don't always appear if you're using an unsupported browser. Also, there's some log files to help you understand what's going on with your license key server. So in the license key server logs folder, you'll find these 3 helpful logs. You know, of course, the LMGRD, and that provides you a status of the license key server, indicates that you found the license key, like LKS license.dat file, shows you your licenses. So, you know, that gives you a good feeling when that actually loads properly. Then you have this other log file, the RLKS, and that provides a running history of when the license server was started and stopped. So it's a running history of the whole license key server. And then there's a tick report, and that kind of just shows you the real-time status of the server. It's just gonna be 1 line, server's up and running. That's it, that's it. But very helpful logs when you're troubleshooting an installation. Now here's one, and a good tip that you know, I experienced, and you know, I was moving some license servers around for a customer, and I was doing this, and you know, I got a new license.dat file, and of course, I'm going to stay in IBM compliance, so I'm going to delete the old license.dat files and the Jazz token zip. I'm going to delete those because I got new ones. So I deleted this file called the LKS license.dat file, and that's stored in your bin directory. And I got generate my new licenses. God was all happy, and then I go to try to install them into my agent, and I'm dragging them over to that box in the top right-hand corner. I'm dragging them over, and I'm like, oh, it's not working. It says operation denied. I'm like, what happened? Well, with a little bit of research, I found out that when you get a new license.dat file and you load it through this GUI, that what it does is that it populates the LKS underscore license.dat file. So it's a container for the contents of the license.dat. And I was like, oh, interesting. So once I actually put that file back, I just created it, and then, oh my God, I could drag my file right into this GUI, and there's all my licenses. There's all my licenses. So don't delete that file if you see it. I was just trying to be a good citizen and delete my my tokens and my DAT file just to stay within IBM compliance. And I have a bunch of other implementation slides, more implementation tips in my appendix, but I don't think I'm going to go through those because I think that's about it that I have right now. So that's it. That's the license key server. Like I said, if you're really concerned with vulnerabilities, it might be good to think about going to ICL 9.x. But if you're in a closed environment, you're not worried about vulnerabilities, then stay on the former license key agent and license key server, and you'll be just fine. And I think that concludes my talk on IBM Common Licensing. So thank you.
Great, Lou. So we have a few questions, and please, if anybody has anything they'd like addressed, go ahead and type it into your question box in your control panel. Let's see. First question, is it possible to use ICL version 9.0 to ring fence certain numbers of tokens for different teams?
Oh, so yeah, so what happens is this one of the configuration options of the server. That's actually in my appendix, and what happens is that you could use a keyword to actually create groups of people or even specific users to have certain tokens. So there's actually a file called ibm.opt that you could actually, that these settings are stored in. But yeah, you can actually assign specific licenses to groups of people, individuals, and set timeout values, reserved licenses for people if needed. And so yeah, yes.
Great.
And you'll see that on my deck when you guys get a copy of this. You'll see I have a couple of slides that talks about that.
Okay. Now that LKS has a web-based interface, can you add it as a friend to the JTS? Is there any value in doing this?
Let me think about this for a minute here. I'm going to say I don't think there's really no need, because right now I have a couple implementations running right now, and they're not really a friend of my JTS, because what I do have is I have my Jazz tokens running off my JTS right now. So I don't think there would be any benefit of making it a friend. That's my thought on that.
Okay.
I haven't got to it yet, so, or encountered that specific use case.
Okay, next question. Does the ART continue capturing data even when the service is not running? Otherwise, it seems like it's pointless installing it and not keeping the service running. Thought?
Well, yeah, no, it's the ART's only going to capture data when it's up and running. It's like I said, out of all my customers and even the gang's customers, we talk about this, is that there's not many people that actually use the reporting tool, because yeah, it does take up additional resources. And like I said, I got one customer now that's trying to do an evaluation of how many tokens they're using, and if I'm not using it, I'm gonna keep it down. If I keep it down, it is not going to record any data, because there's no way for it to actually capture the SQL commands from the server log to actually store into the database, because it's not up. Only if you want to start recording and capturing this information, that you need to bring the ART up.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Next question. Can the ART be added to a widget on an ELM dashboard?
That is a great question. I like that idea, but I would have to actually look into that and get back to that person, or include it in my deck in the appendix. But I like that idea.
Great. Looks like there's one more question. Can customers evaluate version 9 before committing to it?
Oh, most definitely. I'm doing that right now for a customer where I have a staging box, and I'm setting up this the V9 software, and I'm working with IBM now. Well, I did work with IBM to get myself an eval of token licenses, and I'm putting it on this server to use in my staging environment. So yes, most definitely, you can eval this before putting this into production.
Great. Well, Lou, it looks like that concludes the question session, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you. I got a bunch more coming down the line. So
great. So this session was recorded, and it will be available for playback at 321gang.com under the Resources tab within 3 business days. You can also find other previously recorded webinars there, and we'll be sending out an email with a link to view the recording. If you have any other questions or would like any additional information, please email us at info@321gang.com. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.